My stomach dropped as my mother-in-law sent me a text message. Meeting for a family emergency. At precisely 7 o'clock tonight sharp. Everyone must be present. Despite being married to Wyatt for 10 years, Kylie's words could still drag me back to the terrified 22-year-old who first stepped foot into their mansion. My name is Aaliyah, and this is the story of how I went from being their so-called gold digger to becoming the only person who could save them. Wyatt walked into our bedroom, loosened his tie, and told me we didn't have to go. It's probably just my mom acting out again, he muttered. I looked him in the eye, quietly placing my phone down. When did she stop being just dramatic and start being dangerous? This felt different, in a way I couldn't quite explain. As I looked in the mirror and adjusted my blazer, I caught my reflection. That timid girl who once feared the Bryants, she was gone. Someone new had taken her place. Someone they never saw coming. Remember the dinner we had with them? Wyatt asked, wrapping his arms around my waist. How could I forget, I answered, locking eyes with him. Your mom thought I was after your inheritance the moment she saw my thrift store heels, he sighed. I regret that prenup. Don't, I replied. It turned out to be the most motivating thing anyone ever did to me. Another ding. My phone buzzed again. It was Christian this time. Are you ready for tonight? Businesswoman, he texted. As ready as I'll ever be. I typed back with a smile. What's Christian say? Wyatt asked. Glancing over, I quickly locked my phone. Just touching base, I replied. You know how he gets when he's nervous. The drive to the Bryants' house was tense. With every mile, memories came flooding back. Kylie's smug comments about my upbringing, Luke's financial advice. The way conversations would hush the moment I entered the room. As we approached the gates, Wyatt squeezed my hand. They're going to be really impressed by the foundation's impact, he said. I didn't respond. I just hoped he'd be right. In the circular driveway, Elisa's car was already parked. She stood near the entryway, pacing and tapping her nails, just like she did when we were younger, and she was stressed. She rushed toward us the second we got out. Mom's furious, she said breathlessly. Did something happen? Wyatt asked. She's been acting strange, and Dad's been locked in his office all day. We followed her inside. The mansion was just as suffocating as I remembered, still adorned in its outdated, stifling grandeur. The massive oil painting of Kylie in her debutante gown still dominated the entry hall. Then her voice rang out from the staircase. Oh, look who it is. There she stood perfectly coiffed at the top of the stairs. Behind her was Luke, looking unusually tense. Mom, what's going on? Wyatt asked as we walked up. I'll show you, Kylie said coldly. Her icy blue gaze landed on me. We have a lot to discuss. With your wife. The way she said wife, like it was a slur, made my blood boil. But I kept my face neutral. I'd had years of practice. We entered Luke's study. Something was off. The usual scent of cigars and leather was tainted by something. Unsettled. Paintings were missing. Personal items were gone. Something was coming. Kylie stood by Luke's desk, placing a thick folder down. You really thought we wouldn't find out, she said. Her voice tight. Find out what I asked. Trying to keep my heart from pounding too loud. All the money moving around, shell companies, dummy accounts. Luke's voice cracked through the tension like a whip. You've been stealing from us. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Aaliyah. Is fraud funny to you? He snapped, without flinching. I grabbed the folder and opened it. Page after page of transactions, filings, investment reports, impressive effort. I looked up. You've been tracking something all right, but not what you think. I pointed at a section of the records. See? While you were busy monitoring movement, you missed where the ownership of your company's debt has been going. Luke's face fell. What's she talking about? Wyatt asked. Now clearly concerned, I stood slowly, smoothed my skirt. I think it's time for a different kind of family meeting. One where I lay out the plan to save your collapsing empire. The room went still. For the first time, I saw fear in Kylie's eyes. Save, Luke asked. From what I nodded toward the bare walls, from this, the silent liquidation, you're already selling assets, aren't you? Luke slammed a hand on the desk. This is madness. But Elisa stepped forward. Wait, could she be right? No one answered. The silence was enough. Wyatt turned to me, stunned. Aaliyah, what's going on? I picked up my phone and dialed Christian. Send them in, I said, and hung up. Send who in, Kylie asked. Suddenly uneasy. My financial team. I replied calmly. 3 sharp-suited professionals entered the room, carrying tablets and portfolios. These are the people who've been analyzing your books. And yes, I said, locking eyes with Luke. That includes the 3 failing developments you tried to hide from your board. Luke slumped into his chair, looking years older in a moment. How did you... I've been monitoring your company for years. I interrupted. The failed Caribbean resort, the tech startups, the debt you tried to bury. Wyatt turned to his father, his voice shaking. Is this true? Just then, the suits began distributing documents. I gestured toward the packets. Page 1 is your current debt status. Page 2 is the entity that holds most of it. They read in silence. I saw Kylie's face blanch. This can't be, she whispered. Elisa's voice trembled. Are we going bankrupt? Not yet, I replied. But you would have been if someone hadn't quietly acquired your debt and kept you afloat. Wyatt gasped. You. I nodded. You remember that prenup? The one that said I couldn't inherit anything or have a say in the business? I smiled slightly. Well, I followed it to the letter. He stared. Then what have you been doing all this time, building something else entirely? Wyatt's voice was low, almost reverent. You mean the foundation? I nodded. It was part of it, but it was never just a charity. It was the public-facing branch, the limb of something much bigger. I turned toward my team. Show them the Artemis Group portfolio. More documents were handed out, crisp pages sliding over the polished table. They flipped through them slowly, and I watched as understanding hit like waves. First confusion, then disbelief, and finally, the cold punch of realization. $15 billion, I said softly, built from scratch. No inheritance, no connections, just 10 years of grit, strategy, and a whole lot of people underestimating me. You're lying, Kylie muttered. But her voice didn't have its usual poison. I met her gaze, calm and certain. The woman you tried to push out for being a gold digger is the one who now controls enough of your debt to take your entire business if I wanted to. But I don't. Luke leaned forward, the sweat visible at his hairline. Then Maul, what do you want? At first, revenge. I wanted you all to see me, really see me. To realize the woman you cast aside was the only one smart enough to fix what you ruined. I sat back down and took Wyatt's hand, but now I want to help. Kylie blinked, stunned. Why, after everything, I didn't flinch? Because I love your son, because I believe in something better than destruction, and because mercy is a far more powerful statement than vengeance. Elisa stood up slowly, eyes on me. I've seen the numbers. Mom, we need her. Kylie shook her head weakly. This is a trick. No, I replied firmly. This is business. Luke's voice was almost a whisper. What's your proposal? I stood again, adjusting my blazer. First, stop treating me like I'm here to rob you. The irony should be clear now. Wyatt gave my hand a soft squeeze. Second, reform the leadership. No more secrets. No more smoke and mirrors. Every dollar, every hire transparent. Luke cleared his throat. And third, I turned to Kylie, letting silence stretch for just a second longer. You'll apologize. Her jaw tightened. Not just to me, to your staff, to your family, to everyone you've bullied, dismissed, or walked over. Starting now. The room fell silent. Kylie's breath came shallow. I could see the war waging behind her carefully made-up face. I'm not asking for groveling. I added, just honesty. I picked up my things. Take the night to think it over. My team will leave the paperwork. Call me when you're ready to talk terms. Wyatt and I turned to go, but before we reached the door, Elisa grabbed my arm. "When did this all start?" A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. "The moment your parents handed me that prenup." The ride home was quiet. Wyatt pulled into the driveway, hands resting on the steering wheel. 10 years, he whispered. "You built all this. While I slept next to you, I wanted to tell you." I said, turning toward him, "So many times, but I needed to do it alone." He nodded slowly. "Show me." 20 minutes later, we were in my home office, the one he always thought I used for grant letters and volunteer scheduling. I opened the secure database. It started with a consulting firm. I said, "Pulling up the earliest records, just me and Christian in the corner of our old apartment." I showed him a grainy photo of us at 2 a.m, hunched over laptops. With each client, I learned, I expanded, I reinvested every cent. I pulled up a timeline of growth, each project branching into another, each win compounding. "You remember when your mom mocked my shoes at Christmas?" I asked. That year, I had already doubled my assets. He shook his head. I had no idea. A knock at the door. We turned. It was Elisa, hovering in the hallway. She looked conflicted. "I followed you," she admitted. "Can I see?" I gestured her in. Good timing. Elisa stepped inside slowly, scanning the screens. "Did our family really treat you that badly?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer. I brought up another file instead. "This might interest you," I said. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the title. 3 years ago. Your dream to launch a fashion line. The investor who pulled out last minute." Her mouth opened slightly. "That was you?" she asked. I nodded. "Through a front company. Your parents had scared off the others, but I kept it quiet so you wouldn't feel like you owed me. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed you to want your freedom more than you wanted their approval." Elisa stared at me. "That's so... you..." Wyatt pointed to another folder. "What's this one, the Thompson Project?" I said. His eyes widened. "Dad's biggest rival." I nodded. 3,000 jobs saved. One company turned around. All while Luke's own project collapsed. "That's why it worked," Elisa said. "Because he refused to listen to anyone." My phone buzzed. Christian again. "Luke's been calling people," I said, scanning the message, trying to rally support. Wyatt's eyes narrowed. "What now?" I pulled up one final document. My plan to restructure the company. New leadership. Full transparency. "Mom will never agree." Elisa said, "She won't have a choice." Wyatt leaned back, jaw tight. "You could crush them." I nodded. "With one call." "But you won't." "No," I said, "because that's not what this is about." I closed the laptop. It's not about winning. It's about earning my place, my dignity. He reached for my hand. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you." "I didn't need protection," I replied. "I needed to be seen." Elisa glanced back at the screen. The foundation. Was it real? I smiled and pulled up photos. Scholarships, schools, people we'd helped, absolutely real. I said, "Because I believe money should mean something." My phone buzzed again. "Luke, they're ready," I said, standing. Elisa followed us to the door. "I'm coming with you." As we gathered our things, I caught my reflection in the window. The young bride they once underestimated was gone. In her place stood a woman made of iron and quiet fire. "Let's go show them what real power looks like," I said. She nodded and followed. The morning sun lit up the Bryant estate, but it no longer felt imposing. It looked scared, like the mask it had worn for decades was finally slipping. Before we could knock, Luke opened the door. He looked worn, pale. His shirt was wrinkled, collar askew. "The board's furious," he muttered. "An emergency session has been called." "I know," I replied, walking past him. "I'm the one who called it." Inside the study, the usual polish was smudged with desperation. Kylie stood among piles of financial printouts. Her makeup was still flawless, but her red-rimmed eyes betrayed a sleepless night. Empty coffee cups littered the table. How? How did we miss this? She asked in a brittle voice. You were building this empire under our noses. You didn't want to see. I said evenly. You were too busy waiting for me to fail, watching my shoes, judging my past, mocking my ambition. But while you tried to keep me beneath you, I was climbing. Elisa stepped forward. Mom, I found something else. She dropped a folder on the table. The Barbados resort, the one Dad said collapsed. Luke froze. His face went white. It didn't fail. Elisa continued. It turned a profit. A portion of that money went missing. I added, vanished from the company's books. Someone with access redirected it. Wyatt grabbed the folder, flipping through pages. Dad. What was I supposed to do? Luke finally snapped. Your mother had expectations. The lifestyle, the reputation, none of it came cheap. Kylie sat down slowly, whispering. We didn't have the money. Another buzz from my phone. Christian again. The board's already at HQ, I said. We have to go. The vote's happening in 1 hour. To watch us burn. Kylie asked bitterly. To save your company, I replied, grabbing my keys, unless you'd prefer telling your friends you're selling this house by next month. The drive to headquarters was thick with silence. Wyatt drove. Elisa sat in the back, her hands fidgeting nervously. Luke and Kylie followed in their own car, like passengers trailing their own consequences. When we arrived, familiar faces dotted the parking garage shareholders, directors, investors. People I'd spent years building quiet relationships with. George, the chairman, spotted me first. Mrs. Harrison. He greeted warmly. It's Bryant now, I said with a small smile. But most of you probably know me as the CEO of Artemis Group. He blinked in stunned silence. Around us. Murmurs swirled. I gestured toward the elevator. Shall we? The boardroom was packed, every seat filled. Whispers filled the air until Luke and Kylie slipped in and took their places at the very end of the long table. I walked to the head, placed my folder on the polished wood, and met their eyes one by one. Ladies and gentlemen, I began. This company is in trouble, deep trouble, but it didn't happen overnight. The rot began years ago, camouflaged by showmanship and pride. Behind me, a screen lit up with financial projections, red lines, losses, debt spirals, real data, no more illusions. Gasps, whispers, but there is a way forward. I said, a merger with Artemis Group, a restructuring, new leadership, full transparency, sustainable growth. And who controls Artemis Group? A skeptical board member asked. I do. I answered clearly. The same woman who married into this family and was forced to sign a prenup that excluded her from everything. Shock. Ripples of disbelief. I saw Kylie sink lower in her seat. My proposal is this, I continued. We restructure leadership immediately. We stop bleeding money into failed vanity projects. We reinvest in our people, our infrastructure, our future. George's eyes flicked toward Luke and current leadership. We'll step down, I said, effective today. Luke shot up from his seat. This is absurd. You can't just erase me. Sit down, Dad, Elisa snapped. You stole from your own company. You don't get to pretend you're the victim. More gasps. Luke slumped back into his chair. I advanced the presentation slides. Here's the transition plan. Each of you has a copy in front of you. You'll have an hour to review it. Then we vote, one by one. The board members got up and filed out to read the documents. Kylie approached me. Her hands trembled. Her voice was quiet. You could have ruined us, she said. Why didn't you? I turned to Wyatt, standing firm beside me, because revenge isn't worth killing something that can be saved. I paused, letting her absorb that. But don't mistake mercy for weakness. The old ways. They die today. She looked down. I thought I was protecting the family from you, but you were protecting it from us. I nodded. The board will vote yes. They trust me more than they trust Luke. The only question is whether you'll accept this with grace or force my hand. She hesitated. Then she held out her hand. I shook it. Across the room. Christian slipped in through the side entrance, tablet in hand, his face grim. "There's more," he said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. He tapped on his screen, then handed over the tablet. "Hidden files. Someone tried to erase them, but they're intact." I scanned quickly, my heart pounded. "Luke," I said without looking up, "can you explain the second will?" He blinked. "What your father's original will, the one you claimed left everything to you." I held up a printed page. "There's another, one that split the company between you and Margaret, your sister." Kylie went pale. "Margaret died 20 years ago. Car crash? Did she—" Christian handed me a bank document because someone's been depositing money into an account under her name regularly since her death. Up until 3 months ago, a stunned silence swept the room. Luke's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Tell us the truth," Kylie whispered. I had no choice. Luke croaked. "She was going to sell the company, dissolve everything. I couldn't let her destroy it." "You forced her out," I said flatly, "had her disappear, took the money, buried the truth." Wyatt slammed his hand on the table. "She's your sister." Elisa's eyes welled. Is she alive?" I pulled out my phone. "Hey, Margaret," I said gently, "we're ready." The door opened, and there she was. Silver hair, the same eyes as Luke, the same smile as Elisa. Luke stepped back like he'd seen a ghost. "Hello, little brother," she said softly. Kylie reached for the table, pale as a sheet. "I'm sorry," Margaret said. "Luke made me sign a gag agreement. I wanted to come back, but I couldn't." "Which," I added, "is now void, along with any legal claim Luke has to the company." Luke's voice cracked. "How long have you known?" 3 months. I said. "She came to Artemis Group after the payments stopped. She had no idea who I was." Wyatt's eyes were wide. You were building all this." And helping her come back, I nodded. "She'll serve as co-chair. The board has already approved it." Luke moved like he might protest, but Margaret raised a hand. He sat down. 20 years, she said, her voice shaking. "I lost 20 years. My family, my legacy. I should press charges." She looked at me, "But I won't, because of her." Kylie turned to me, voice barely audible. "Why?" "Because healing," I said, "is sometimes more powerful than revenge." Elisa walked to Margaret's side, touching her arm. "You took Mom's photos with you, didn't you? The ones we thought were lost?" Margaret smiled gently. "I did. I needed to remember the family I lost. And now," I said, "you have a chance to rebuild it." Luke slumped forward. "What now?" Margaret took a breath. "Now, we rebuild. But first, Kylie." Kylie flinched. "You owe your daughter-in-law an apology." Margaret said, "A real one." Kylie stood, unsteady. "Aaliyah, She swallowed hard. "I was wrong. About everything." "You weren't trying to steal from us," she said. "You were trying to save us." I nodded once. Wyatt wrapped an arm around me. "The new board meets tomorrow," I said. "Margaret and I will lead the transition." I turned to Luke. "You'll provide a full accounting of the missing funds. Then to Kylie, you'll help Elisa launch her fashion line properly this time." Wyatt leaned in with a grin. And me, I laughed. "You, my love. You get to watch your wife and aunt fix everything your family broke." Margaret picked up the second will, tracing her father's signature. "He would have loved you," she said quietly. "You have his fire." Elisa smiled. "Wait till the society columns hear about this." "They won't," I replied. "Some things stay in the family." I straightened my spine. "Now, let's get to work." 3 weeks into the transition, the office had started to feel like mine. Not just a title, not just a desk, but a space shaped by purpose and truth. Every file that passed through my hands brought us closer to clean books, ethical decisions, and an actual future. So when I found Luke sitting in my office at 4 a.m., the glow from the computer screens bouncing off his pale face, I knew something was wrong. The security log said he'd been here for hours, alone. I set down my coffee. Couldn't sleep. He didn't smile. He slid a folder across the desk. "We need to talk, in private." I opened it. More offshore accounts, more shell companies, but different this time, older, buried deeper. How much, I asked. His voice was thin, enough to tank the entire merger. If this leaks, and even Artemis Group can't absorb the blow. I closed the folder slowly. "And what is it you're proposing?" "Luke." He leaned forward, desperation twisting his features. "Make it disappear. Bury it. In exchange, I keep my seat on the board, full voting rights, no interference." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Blackmail. That's your grand plan. I'm trying to protect what's left." "No," I said coldly. "Standing? You're trying to claw back your control." Again, the door opened behind him. Margaret stepped in, flanked by Wyatt and Elisa. Christian wasn't far behind. "You knew they'd be here," Luke said, his voice trembling. "I knew you'd try something," I replied. "I just didn't know when." Wyatt crossed his arms. "We've been monitoring your calls, your movements, every sneaky meeting, every attempt to cover your tracks." Elisa stepped forward. "Did you really think you could outmaneuver her? After everything, Luke opened his mouth. Nothing came out." Margaret set down a tablet and hit play. A live news broadcast flickered onto the office wall. An anchor, voice steady, was reporting breaking news. An anonymous whistleblower had exposed decades of financial fraud within the Bryant Company. Luke's mouth dropped open. "No, that wasn't... We didn't leak it," I said, folding my arms. "You did. Every panicked email, every contact. You left a trail." Margaret's voice was ice. "The SEC has everything." Wyatt stepped in front of Luke, blocking his path. "Sit down." Luke did. My voice was calm, but firm. "Reporters will be here in 30 minutes. The board will demand answers by noon. Shareholders are already on edge. You'll destroy the company," Luke muttered. "No," I said. "You already did that. We're just disinfecting the wound." Elisa's voice was steady. "And let's not forget what you took." Margaret looked directly at him. "You didn't just steal money. You stole time, legacy, a future. From all of us." I turned to my laptop. "The damage is real, but we've prepared. I've already spoken with every major investor. They understand the necessity of exposure. They trust the process." "You think the stock won't drop?" Luke asked, bitter. "Oh, it will," Margaret replied. "But it'll rise again, because now the foundation is real." I clicked the presentation open on the screen. Our new plan, total transparency, new leadership, board reform, sustainable growth strategy, a full timeline, Wyatt added. "All partners have been notified. They're staying on." Luke looked around the room like a drowning man. This is a coup." "No," I said softly. "This is accountability." He slumped into the chair. "You think you're better than me. I think I worked harder." I replied, "and cleaner." Silence fell. Christian glanced at the clock. "Press arrives in 20 minutes. I'll talk to them." I said, "But first, we finish this." I looked at Luke. "You're out. Permanently. No voting rights, no title, no buyout. You can't do that," he whispered. "Yes, I can." Margaret replied, "You made this possible the moment you falsified accounts and silenced your sister." "You could face criminal charges," Wyatt added. He looked up, wide-eyed. "You wouldn't... That's not up to me anymore," I said. Christian pulled out a final set of documents. "These will be filed with the federal authorities after the press conference. The choice is yours. Cooperate now, or spend years untangling it all from a courtroom cell." Luke's shoulders sagged. "I'll cooperate. I expected you would." Margaret stepped closer. "I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it for the employees you endangered, for the legacy you dragged through the mud, for our father, for the people who trusted you." Luke didn't reply. I turned to Christian. "Secure the files. Ensure full encryption, then prep for the conference. He nodded. Wyatt walked with me to the hallway. You okay? I nodded, exhaling. I didn't want it to come to this, but it had to. He said, yes, it did. We walked past a wall of old photos, generations of Bryants, men in suits, women in pearls. None of them ever imagined someone like me standing at the helm. We stepped outside. The media had gathered. Lights, microphones, flashes. I stood behind the podium as Wyatt and Margaret flanked me. Good morning, I said calmly. Today we begin a new chapter, one of truth and growth and earned trust. A reporter called out, is it true you're taking over the Bryant Corporation? I'm restructuring it. I said, to save what can be saved, to protect jobs, to rebuild the name that's been tarnished. What about the fraud? Another asked. We're not hiding from it. We're exposing it. That's how change begins. Kylie arrived late, slipping into the background. I caught her eye. She looked tired, and maybe, just maybe, finally humbled. After the press cleared, she approached. I watched from home. She said, you were incredible. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I know. She hesitated, but I'm still glad I saw it. She stepped closer. What happens to Luke? Whatever the law decides, and us. I paused. That's up to you. Kylie, redemption's a road you walk. No one can carry you. I want to try, she said quietly. I believed her. Wyatt joined us. You ready? He asked. I nodded. Margaret came forward, handing me a pen. Let's sign it. The transition papers. We signed, one by one. Margaret, Wyatt, Elisa, Kylie, and me. The ink was still drying when I realized something. This wasn't the end of the story. It was only just beginning. The ink on the transition documents hadn't even dried before the first real test arrived. A supplier in Arizona, responsible for manufacturing key components for one of our most vital projects, announced they were suspending operations. Rumors of financial instability were spreading like wildfire. Normally, a situation like that would have triggered panic across the board, but not this time. Because now, the people at the top were people who had already faced the storm and refused to break. Margaret and I gathered with our leadership team just after sunrise the next morning. She was sharp, direct, and composed so different from the scared young woman Luke had once forced into silence. Watching her move through the boardroom now, fully restored, was a kind of justice I never thought I'd see. We're not going to throw money at this, she said, tapping a chart with her pen. We do due diligence. If this supplier folds, we pivot fast. She turned to me. Aaliyah, I already reached out to our West Coast contacts. There's a mid-sized plant in San Jose that can absorb the overflow. They're union-friendly and already work with our specs. She nodded with satisfaction. Good. That's exactly the kind of solution we need from here on out. No ego, no games, just answers. I couldn't help but smile. We weren't just cleaning house. We were building something new, something that could actually stand. After the meeting, Wyatt joined me on the rooftop terrace of the headquarters. He handed me a mug of hot coffee and sat down beside me, quiet for a while. Then, finally, he asked, so what now? I looked out over the city. Now we lead. He nodded, but there was something in his eyes, hesitation, or maybe awe. I turned toward him, talked to me. I guess I'm still wrapping my head around it. He said slowly, everything you built, everything you carried alone. Well, he trailed off. You believed in me, I said gently. Even when you didn't understand, that mattered. He reached for my hand. I want to be part of it, for real. I don't want to just be your husband who cheers from the sidelines. I squeezed his fingers. Then come in. Fully mugged. There's room for you. Later that day, I received a call from one of our scholarship recipients, a young woman named Darlene. She'd just gotten into medical school. Her voice was trembling with joy. "You don't know me," she said, "but I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you." I sat in silence, listening. The old me would have cried. The new me. She smiled, quietly, and simply said, "That's exactly why we do it. I didn't need public credit. I didn't want fanfare. What I wanted was exactly that moment, real change, reaching real people. By the end of the week, we held our first all-staff town hall. I stood at the front, facing hundreds of employees, some skeptical, some curious, some hopeful. For many, it was the first time they'd heard my voice, not as a footnote in the Bryant family, but as the woman who now led them. "I'm not going to pretend we haven't been through hell," I said, looking them each in the eye, "but we're standing. And from this moment forward, every decision will be made with one goal, to make this a company worth believing in." Elisa stood beside me as we unveiled her new fashion division. The designs hers entirely flashed across the screen. She looked radiant, proud, finally free. Later, she pulled me aside, eyes misty. "You could have let me fall apart, but instead, you helped me build. You always had the talent." I told her, "I just made sure no one stole it from you." We hugged, and for the first time, it felt like family, not the kind I married into, but the kind I chose. Even Kylie, to her credit, began showing up differently. She didn't transform overnight, but she showed up. She asked questions, she listened, she apologized. Again and again, not just to me, but to staff, to partners, to her own daughter, and she meant it. Sometimes we heal, sometimes we evolve. One afternoon, Margaret brought in a box from storage. Inside were photos, letters, and an old journal belonging to her and Luke's father. "This," she said, placing it on my desk, "is what he wanted. Not just numbers on a balance sheet, but his people being taken care of." We spent an hour flipping through memories, laughing softly at the dated suits and ambitious scribbles in the margins of old plans. "This isn't a company anymore," she said. "It's a living legacy. And you're the one who restored it." I didn't reply. I just nodded, heart full, throat tight, because I'd spent a decade trying to prove I belonged. And now I didn't just belong. I was the architect of their survival. The final test came a month later, when the remaining family shareholders requested a meeting. The old guard, those still clinging to names, to bloodlines, to pride, they demanded explanations. Some even demanded I step aside now that things were stable. I let them speak. I let them bluster. Then I opened the portfolio that sat beside me. Everything you see in this company now, every stabilized asset, every salvaged deal, every retained employee exists because someone refused to back down when your leadership failed. I pointed to the data, the debt I had acquired, the lifelines I had pulled. If that isn't leadership, I don't know what is. They left that room quiet. Not all were pleased, but all of them finally understood the girl they once dismissed now held the keys. Not just to the company, to the legacy, to the future. As I walked out, Wyatt was waiting in the hallway. He didn't say anything, just opened his arms. I stepped into them, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was defending myself. I felt seen. I felt whole. And as the sun set behind the city skyline, lighting up the glass walls of the building that now bore both the Bryant name and my soul's imprint, I knew this wasn't revenge. This was redemption, and it was mine.